You know, cap irons, they just suck. But they seem to be the integral part of pretty much all modern hand planes. So let's see if we can make them a little bit better. The second most common problem people have with our hand planes, after them just not being sharp, deals with this chip breaker. Because shavings get caught up underneath them, which causes it to stop cutting. It's just a royal nightmare getting everything adjusted just perfectly. And I've come to the opinion that they really don't do anything unless you get them perfectly set up, and there's no reason to get them perfectly set up because a solid blade will cut just as well if you know what you're doing and you pick proper wood. But most of these kind of Bailey style hand planes, and it seems like all modern beveled down hand planes, deal with a chip breaker. So let's see what we can do to improve this thing. Now the whole idea behind a chip breaker is it actually compresses the wood fibers in front of the cut so that it won't tear out as you plane. Basically the fibers come in here and they crumple up, and then you get that curlies coming off right there. That's the way it's supposed to work. But I've seen videos, and I'll show that to you in the bonus today, where that really isn't the case unless you get it perfectly set up. And then there are a lot of other variables that come into effect. What normally happens is because you've gotten an old hand plane that's highly worn down or something like that, wood shavings bind up underneath the cap at certain spots, causing it to kind of fumble up to the point where the blade actually never gets a chance to touch the wood, and it just all comes up and gets very, very frustrating. So, assuming you've already flattened the back of your blade, at least that bottom inch, what we need to do is create a situation where the front of your chip breaker and ideally the back of the chip breaker completely rest flush on the blade. Good luck getting that to happen. I've come up with another way in that we put an edge on it so it's down at an angle like that. So at least you know the front is touching, so less likely the shavings come up. It's not as solid a contact, but it solves the problem of shavings coming up underneath. Now, in the ideal situation, you know, the chip breaker sits like that, and when you squeeze it down, it compresses it, and it adds a lot of mass to your blade and makes it a little bit more stable. And this was important back when steel was really expensive. I think that might be one of the original reasons why they came up with it, in addition to it housing all your controls. But it's this edge right here, as I said earlier, that's the problem. And as things wear out, you hit knots or something like that, it gets all nicked up over time, or it just wears and rounds over, you have problems there. And if you notice how they make them, it's just another piece of flat steel with this curve on the end that creates the lift up and creates a space underneath. Now, once again, in the ideal situation, you would have that blade sitting completely flat, and supposedly, theoretically, you could sit here and press down right here, and it would match that bevel. But if you remember, this thing flexes in the middle, and that can raise that lip up, and that's why a lot of beginners, when they go through restorations and they do it this technique, eventually they get shavings coming up underneath. My solution is to hang it off the side so that the angle is down, so this angle comes up. That way when you bring it up, the edge is lower than the back of this section right here. And then just take a few passes trying to stay as vertical as possible. And you only need to take off enough until you get a shine all the way across. Now if you notice in this one right here how it's duller right there, that tells me that this had a concave, and that's why shavings were coming up in the middle. So if I keep coming until I get that nice shiny spot all across the front edge, I'm not pressing down here. I want to kind of flatten it out as I go around. And once I have that shiny spot, a little bit more, I am all set. This is ready to rock and roll. Now I've got another trick. Research has shown me that having this angle coming back right here, it doesn't push forward against the fibers, kind of like what we showed in that diagram. you actually want a bit of a straight line right there, a straight front. So I will come over, I'll lay it flat right here, and I'll just take a few swipes. Once again, this is on the microscopic level, so you don't have to do too much. Vertically until I get a nice shiny coming up front. Now I have a ledge hitting the wood and not a curve. So now we're going to put the chip breaker back on, and remember, you never want to bring the chip breaker down from the top. Always load it up way far back and sneak up on a tight finish. And if you go to my bonus today, you'll understand that you got to get really close, or then just don't worry about it. I personally don't really worry about it because I'm so used to straight blades without chip breakers, and if you set it back a millimeter from the edge, it's just as much as you're not using a chip breaker at all as far as the finish. So tighten it up, put it in the plane, and let's see if it makes a shaving. So for today's video, I want to talk about one of the most fascinating videos I've seen on woodworking. Wilbur Pan of the Giant Cypress blog, he has a Vimeo channel. And a few years ago, he got permission to republish a kind of research project that two Japanese professors did. Now this video is in Japanese, but they do have subtitles. And it's all about the influence of a cap iron in a plane. And they basically took microscopic photos, video of a plane in action as it was engaging the wood. And this is the video that convinced me that chip breakers are really unnecessary and my now preference for just single irons. Go check it out. It is just, I mean, it's one of those videos that if you're not a woodworker, it's going to be boring as hell. But man, if you're a woodworker, analyze what's happening just fractions of a millimeter in front of the blade. It's just mind-boggling to me. You can actually see fibers compressing, splitting, getting shape. I mean, go check it out.